And good evening to our fellow listeners and followers. Today is Sunday, August 25th at 8:31 p.m. This is Federico Lines of States' Rights Radio and
Seth Hancock of Seth Hancock Reports. And tonight's episode, we are interviewing David Leach, the author of his new book, The New Axis of Evil, Exposing the Bipartisan War on Liberty. And he is also the publisher of the Strident Conservative. So welcome, David. Thank you for taking the time. If you want to kind of tell our listeners where they can find you and your work.
Sure, happy to. First of all, thank you for having me on. It's always fun to talk about my stuff. So my name is David Leach. I am the owner of the editor, the main writer, and marketing guy. Is kind of a one-man operation of the StridentConservative, and if any of your listeners would like to check it out, it's very simple. It's StridentConservative.com, and you can find archives going all the way back to the Obama administration if you're so inclined, but mostly over the past, I'd say ever since about 2016, my focus has shifted away. I'm still a conservative. In fact, in my book, I mentioned that right at the very beginning. You know, I'm a Christian constitutional conservative. And so I still believe in conservative values. But the thing that I've tried to focus on, like I said, mostly since around 2016, maybe even a little bit before then, maybe 2014, on the assault on liberty that we're getting. Actually, you know what? I'll expand that just a little further. Actually, it probably goes back to 9/11. So 9/11, 2011, when I would say that we probably, no, that was 2001, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Boy, it's been a long time. This assault's been getting intense for a long time. So yeah, going back to the events of 9/11 and the Patriot Act and things like that, those all just kind of became a little nucleus for what eventually, and now seems like it's an overdrive, an outright assault on liberty. It's coming from both parties. It doesn't really seem to matter too much protecting our constitutional rights as much as it is just like, hey, I want the R's in charge or I want the D's in charge. And it seems their only motivation in Washington anymore is protecting the duopoly instead of trying to protect and defend the Constitution.
Yeah, and I was in college Republicans during the George W. Bush administration. My first election was 2004, and I was a rah-rah Republican. And I remember in 2008 when Bush said, to save the free market system, we have to abandon it. That was kind of my wake-up call to start thinking for myself. And then you fast forward to 2012, I became a Ron Paul supporter. I know Ron Paul had a blurb for your book, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I started kind of waking up to just how, both parties are they're playing for the same team. It's against the Constitution, against us. And was there you mentioned 9/11, was there a specific thing that happened, that a specific event that told you, that kind of woke you up to how both parties are basically attacking us?
Well, I'd have to say, I briefly mentioned it just a few minutes ago, but I'd have to say it was the passage of the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act was unanimous almost. Congress back then was more evenly divided, and there was a lot more influence from the Democrats, looking at it from the George Bush point of view. And so the way that just sailed through. In fact, some people, even in the Bush administration, some of his own people said that the Patriot Act was a step too far. And under the Patriot Act, we eventually ended up with NSA spying. We ended up with Guantanamo. We ended up with early versions of spying on cell phone and internet communications. All of that kind of got its start under the Patriot Act. And so I would say, to answer your question, it was definitely the passage of the Patriot Act and the fact, much like it was during COVID, the fact that if you objected to the Patriot Act, then you obviously weren't serious, or you were basically pro-terrorist. That and it's like, that, no, hold on, I think we need to do something. We should retaliate. We should do something about the obvious attack on America. But to do it, I remember the talking point after the Patriot Act passed, and the first couple of years after 9/11, the common talking point was, we can't let the terrorists win. And when you think about what the terrorists were trying to do, they were trying to destroy, they were trying to destroy liberty in America. They were trying to do it through destroying our financial center by attacking the World Trade Center. And they were trying to destroy it through our governmental center with the attack on the Pentagon and the attack that was foiled by Flight 93, the attack on the Capitol. It was, and it's just like, they actually did succeed. They didn't succeed the way they wanted to, but we ended up cooperating with them on saying, hey, we gotta not let people be quite so free in order to make sure that we're safe. And that was it for sure for me. The Patriot Act was really big, and it went from there. There was a Patriot Act 2. They expanded it years later, and then of course FISA laws, and there was a lot. There was an awful lot. But I would say definitely passage of the Patriot Act probably is the thing that woke me up to the thing like, you know what? I don't think Washington's looking out for us anymore.
No, you're right. And to that point, to me, I would say, I was a raw Republican even with after the 2001, and I kind of did support the Patriot Act, but yet as reading more into it, and also reading the history of how the federal government has really infiltrated the lives of individuals and against their liberties and rights. Starting again, many people are not aware of the Alien and Sedition Act of 1798 during the second president of the United States, where that to me was a wake up call that even Thomas Jefferson says that you're trampling on the Constitution. And and yet there's a thing here that the majority of Americans, it's only a very minority of Americans that really understand the threat of central autonomy, central autocracy that has the federal government become. But the majority of Americans, they just wanna don't think about it, or they just want to vote for this person because he's gonna make you richer or whatever, and they don't understand the concept of the dangers of what they're voting for Kamala or Trump or W. Bush or Clinton or all the way back to LBJ or FDR or Nixon. So it's very unnerving to see Americans, a quite majority of them, not really, they think it's a rah, and I was a rah once until I kind of did a wake-up call. But and I really saw the dangers of the federal government, and then with the Supreme Court acknowledging Korematsu versus the United States, that it's okay for the United States to imprison people, and then you had the Trump Muslim ban that also imprisoned Muslim Americans from that. So it's alarming that I know you was a wake up call on Patriot Act, and there was a wake up call with me later on, but the majority of Americans need to realize that it's been an ongoing thing where you've had a lot of framers, a lot of people that came after the framers that had that concept of a big government takeover, a big government dependency on it. And I keep mentioning people that's not the reason why America fought the Revolutionary War, the war for independence against Great Britain. They want to get rid of that, and yet we're looking forward to see a king on the throne and up in the White House, and I just laugh and cry at the same time, saying that's not the America that I'm glad I became a citizen. I love it, but that's not the America that I want to sing praises to a king or King Donald or Queen Kamala. I don't want to see that.
Me neither, my friend. Not at all.
Yeah, and I know you have a couple excerpts from your book on the Strident Conservative, and you touched on the Patriot Act and post 9/11 and one of those excerpts. And the other excerpt, you talk a little bit about some of the things we should be focused on trying to get our liberty back. Can you talk about what you think are the solutions? Because for Federico and myself, we don't see any solutions in Washington D.C. We think it's got to be focused locally. We need to, and we can vote locally, but also just the American people need to start taking ownership over their own lives, and that's the big problem I see is people always are pointing the finger at somebody else is to blame for all their problems. What are some of the things you think of on how we can start gaining our liberty back?
Well, it begins, you mentioned briefly there about acting locally, and I believe that is really, it has to start locally. It has to start, it's got to start with your local school boards, your local county commissioners, your local council members and mayors, and, there's a couple reasons for that. Number one is that most people who end up in Washington got their feet wet at the local level. And so if you want to eventually change Washington, you're not going to do it through one election. You know what? Everybody could vote Republican straight down the line in November, and it wouldn't change a thing because it doesn't change the climate in Washington. It doesn't change the environment. It's got to start locally. You got to start. And there's other reasons to do it locally too. For example, school boards. The whole. I don't like using the phrase, but the whole woke movement. The pushing of a far left agenda that's very pro LGBT and pro socialism, very Marxist, in fact, in many ways. And you know what? If you can get a couple of good Constitution-believing conservatives on your local school board, that can maybe start making a little bit of a difference. And then from there, it can go to those other branches of government, then to the state level, and then to the federal level. So you got to start locally, mainly for that reason, because I can't change much by who I vote for in Washington. But I can change quite a bit if I vote for the right person locally, and if I get enough other people to vote that way as well. So acting locally is very, very important, but it requires a choice. I did an article one time where I quoted a line from the Matrix, the third one in the trilogy, where Agent Smith seems like he's totally destroyed Neo. He's taken over all of the Matrix, and he's got Neo on the ground, and it looks like Neo's about to die. And then he gets up and stands up one more time, and Agent Smith doesn't understand it. He says, "What are you doing this? Why are you doing this? What motivates you? Is it love? Is it power? Is it just why do you persist?" And Neo just looks up, very weakly whispers out, "Because I choose to." And that's really where it really begins. We have to choose to say, you know what, I'm going to make a difference starting now, and I'm going to do it locally. I choose to do that. I'm not going to allow the duopoly. I'm not going to allow Republicans and Democrats who are only interested in protecting Republicans and Democrats tell me how I should vote, tell me what I should think about certain issues, tell me what I should or shouldn't do based on what they think is best for me. I'm going to act locally. A good friend of mine who's in talk radio, her name is Shannon Joy. She's developing a phrase here. She's starting to teach her listeners to be ungovernable, and it doesn't mean to be, to do things illegal or anything like that. But it's like, you know what? You need to come to a point where you just say, I'm not going to allow the government to decide my do's and don'ts in life. I'm going to, that's not what the founders envisioned. That's not what the Constitution says I have. I have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness under the Declaration of Independence. Those rights come from God, and the Constitution was created to protect those rights. And so I want to do, I'm going to just make that choice to act locally and forget about what these other people say. And if they say, for example, that I have to start wearing a mask again, I'm going to be ungovernable. I'm not going to wear a mask again. The point isn't whether the mask works or not. The point is government can't be telling me what to do. They just can't. They can't tell me that I have to take a vaccine. They can't tell me that I have to, fill in the blank. I mean, gosh, my book is full of examples of the tyranny that we're talking about. And I hope that was a long answer, but I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. And as you brought up, becoming ungovernable, it really is. We've lost the law. I noticed there were some Christian pastors who didn't understand it. They always use Romans 13 as we need to submit to government authority. Well, the government doesn't have full authority over us. In America, the Constitution's king. And the Constitution says the government can't do this, can't do that to us. And yet we had so many people who would probably call themselves conservatives, they call themselves Christians, saying you must submit. Well, not according to the Constitution, which is the law of the land. And COVID was obviously a great example of it. And I think to me, one of the big problems we have today is there's just not enough principles. People, they've lost their foundation. And COVID, again, was a great example of this because, I've come to believe a lot of things about COVID, about where it came from, whether it's real or not, that might be outside of the mainstream. But that doesn't matter to me. I knew that from the very beginning, government has no authority nor ability to protect me from a virus. And so I was against all the lockdowns, everything from the very beginning, whereas, the Trump people, they were all for it at the beginning. Everybody was on board with it at the beginning because, their dear leader was telling them to do it. To me, this is what we've lost the most is our principles that there are areas that the government has no authority whatsoever. And yet the government is telling us everything about our daily lives that they have no authority to do. Do you see that as, one of the big issues is that there are no principles left?
Oh, that goes without saying. And there's a whole another, that could be a basis for a whole other book for me. I mean, I'm old enough to where I prayed in school and read the Bible before we started our class day. And, there's no doubt that, in my mind, that not those two things specifically, but the nonstop barrage of assaults on religious liberty have been key to destroying morality and what you just used, the word you just used, having any principles. There are no principles. Or the only principle is whatever is best for me, and that's not really a principle. But yeah, do you remember during the Republican when in 2016 at the Republican National Convention? Unfortunately, he caved and went to the dark side. But Ted Cruz was booed when he appeared at the convention. When he told people that he told them they should vote their conscience, and that comes directly from the founding fathers. It's the founding fathers who told us that we should let our decisions regarding government should be guided by our conscience. Mm-hmm. And but there is no conscience anymore. Mm-hmm. There's no moral foundation. Even though the left would disagree and people who don't believe in God would disagree, but there are moral absolutes. There is a right and a wrong in just about every situation. Now, there's sometimes a way you don't have to, go too far left or right to make a decision, but For example, abortion, there's a right and a wrong. It's right to protect life. It's wrong to take life. And those are absolutes. But because we've allowed our consciences to be watered down with moral relativism and obviously the absence of God, we don't think that way anymore. Now we think about, what about this? And what about that? And what about rape or incest? What about health of the mother? What about, and you come up with a laundry list of things to try to justify the fact that you basically have chosen the wrong. You've chosen the bad thing. So the loss of conscience is very definitely primarily responsible for what we're seeing in Washington. And you know what? Again, it's kind of interesting too. I mentioned Ted Cruz. I supported Ted Cruz in 2016. I wanted to see him get the nomination, but he's not the Ted Cruz that he was then. This is the guy who did a filibuster reading Green Eggs and Ham just so that he could avoid a vote on a law that would have given Obama the power or authority to kill Americans if Americans had gone. This is the guy who did that, but it's not. He doesn't talk about moral absolutes like that anymore. Now he talks about, this is what's best for the party. Those evil Democrats are doing this. These evil Democrats are doing that, and so I don't know. You've given me something there maybe that I need to think a little bit more about, but I would definitely say that there's definitely an absence of any kind of compass. There you go. There's an absence of a moral compass in politics in general, but that's partially because we've lost our moral compass as a society.
You're right there. You're absolutely right. And, what Seth said, there's a sense of loss of principles, and there's been a lot of unprincipled legislation, unprincipled, executive orders, and just a sense of, the loss of principles that the framers bestowed upon us. And that's, the reason behind my second book, to bring an end to the 16th and 17th unprincipled amendments. Even though they're in the Constitution, they're constitutional, they somewhat remain unprincipled. And, the thing is that, nowadays we are living in, as I like to coin the phrase, an American democracy of dependent states, where it used to be an American republic of sovereign states. But now we've become dependent. So, people want that cash cow from D.C. on whatever they can get their hands on. If they get, whatever they collect from taxes, they want that so bad. And here in Florida is where I live. It's the dependent state of the world where, you have Governor DeSantis claiming state sovereignty and the independence from the federal government. Yet, when there's a hurricane, he's looking for FEMA aid, or the congressional delegation are bringing funds for Medicare. And, the same thing goes for state of Illinois, state of California. We've really, become a sense of dependency. And that's one of the reasons why Barry Goldwater and 3 other Republicans voted against the Civil Rights Act. Now, I support the Civil Rights Act, the 64 Civil Rights Act, because I think, it was very unjustly of what they were doing. What I don't support is the federal funding tied to it, a creation of a civil rights division of DOJ and funding for other stuff that LBJ lobbied through it. And the same thing with the Equal Rights Amendment. If women want to be equal, that's fine, but I don't want federal funding. The same thing for abortion. I don't want federal funding or any type of funding for NARAL or Planned Parenthood, or nowadays, if a child wants to be a girl, that he should receive federal or state funding from the state. I mean, you can be whatever you want to be. This is America. This is the land of the free and opportunity and all that, not at the expense of the public coffers. And that's what one of my heroes, and Seth as well, is Grover Cleveland, that, he did not want to spend 1 cent from the public coffers on special interests. So, but that's basically what, we've really become. And now we're seeing, I would say, I would say like 2000 and 2000. I would say no. Let me take it back. 2008, where you see this, stronghold of who wants to control the purse, with the bailouts and all that. And I saw that openly in 2008, and then we've been seeing it ever since in 2012, 16, 18, 20. And 24 now, that who wants to control the purse, who wants to be dependent, who wants me to give you the money. If you recall, back in 2012, you had the Obama phone. Obama was giving out free cell phones for citizens of Ohio in order for him to get that election, that state of Ohio, on his column. So, we've really become too dependent and lost that principles, and we really need to, loosen that dependency. And, if not, then we're going to be dependent like we were with England.
Well, what you just mentioned reminds me of a couple of quotes from Alexis de Tocqueville, if you don't mind me sharing them. He said that the American Republic will endure until the day Congress discovers that it can bribe the public with the public's money. And he also said along those lines, he said the American Republic will endure until the day Congress discovers that it can bribe the public. So we're definitely, that's definitely where we're at. Look at both conventions. Trump is talking about relaunching his trade war. Well, that's all because of he's going to try to put more money in people's pockets. And then of course you got Kamala Harris saying that she wants to provide down payment assistance for first-time home buyers, and so you've got both sides trying to outspend the other side, and that becomes their only thing. I didn't watch either convention because I wanted to keep my supper down every evening, but there was no mention about the Constitution. There was no mention about, the Democrats tried to say that they were the party of freedom and liberty again, but they used that to say that that's why we should allow abortions to be allowed at the moment of birth. And it's just like, well, see, that's a contradiction in terms. That's the thing that's been missing. It's been missing it's been missing since FDR, really, to be honest. It was Franklin Delano Roosevelt that really kind of got all of this stuff, started. That got, bigger government and manipulating the system and taxing the rich and all kinds of payouts and things of that nature. It becomes, and my gosh, it's like these people aren't even paying attention to the fact that we are so far. We're on a road straight to monetary collapse. There is going to be a day of reckoning, and so that takes us to another part of my book. It's like this takes us then into the world where, now the government's talking about embracing the central bank digital currency idea, and so it's like, okay, CBDCs. What does that mean? Well, that would mean that we can control the economy a little better, so we wouldn't have to deal with all these highs and lows, and we wouldn't have to worry about recessions and stuff like that. Well, how does it do that? Well, it does that by giving the government the ability to basically program your money. They can decide where you can spend it and where you can't. They'll decide how much you have to spend. They'll decide how much you pay in taxes. I mean, it's just and again, it just takes you in the direction where it's like, well, we've got this problem, so here's a government answer to the problem, instead of saying, hey, here's the deal. Instead of trying to go towards a central bank digital currency, why don't we just get our financial house in order and stop spending money on all these things that you mentioned, and just get serious about the fact that we've got to live within our means and get back to where the federal government just takes care of protecting the national defense and promoting the general welfare, and let all this other stuff go back to the states where it was supposed to be in the beginning.
Yeah, and I think if there's one area that I think the American people are just woefully ignorant of, it's financial policy and monetary policy, and I just as Federico mentioned, his book on the 16th and 17th Amendment, those were both 1913, which was also the year the Federal Reserve was created. And, I look at that really being the focal point of when we started to lose the constitutional republic. It was 1913. And today, even the best of Republicans, all they want to do is attack the symptoms, and they don't want to attack the real problem. They don't want to touch the 16th and 17th Amendment. They don't want to return to sound money in the form of a gold standard. They don't want to do what is needed, because, if we start doing the right thing tomorrow, there's going to be some pain. And I recognize that, people are so dependent, and when we strip away their, as they call it, safety net, there's going to be some pain. And I want people to help each other out, but it has to be through free will, not through government force. Mentioning the conventions, I didn't really watch any of the DNC, the RNC. I saw the snippets of Hulk Hogan's speech, which was it's idiocracy. That's all you can say. But you look at the Republicans, where they just completely throw Christian conservatives under the bus with the platform. And you had the log cabin Republicans taking a victory lap on that and thanking Donald Trump. And you had a pagan prayer. You had a porn star speaking there.
Teamsters.
And yet there's still this, Trump has this stranglehold on these people. I don't get it. Do you have a thesis on why Trump is so popular with people who should know better?
Oh man, that is probably one of the things I will never understand. My wife and I are always saying, it's like, I can't believe people are buying this stuff. It's like, but I think actually, quite honestly, it goes back to what we've been talking about, the loss of conscience, the loss of moral clarity, the loss of, standing for absolute values. None of those things exist anymore in Washington. And it's not just Washington. Washington just becomes the under the magnifying glass of society, where it's so obvious. But it's because, as we're just losing out as a society. We're losing our moral compass. As I said earlier, we don't stand for things anymore. We used to stand for right instead of standing for, well, almost right. And the reason Trump has this power hold over the Republicans is because he's proven that he can take anybody down that doesn't go along with him. And so you've got Republicans who are more interested in staying in office than they are about doing what they're supposed to do, as far as protecting our rights and our liberties under the Constitution. They take an oath, for Pete's sake. When it's like, I will do my best to protect and defend the Constitution. That's what they're supposed to do. But that doesn't. It's just words now. It doesn't really mean anything. And so the game of politics is not what it used to be. And actually, that's, I guess, part of the problem. Politics has become a game, and it's become a game that somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. It used to be in our system, politics was more of a, when people decided to go into public service, it was because they wanted to do something in appreciation for all that America was due to the things that we have through the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. So it's just really frustrating, but it's not uncommon. And it exists on the other side too, by the way, because think about this. Up until a couple of weeks ago, Kamala Harris was considered one of the biggest clowns in the Biden administration. She was a joke. She was a tagline in jokes all across, on the left and the right. Nobody respected her. But then once the party convinced Biden to drop out, and they decided that they were going to make her the nominee, suddenly she walks on water. She can't do anything wrong. I watched a video recently by, oh gosh, I can't think of his name here. I'll think of it in a minute. But he's a libertarian, and he does videos, and he exposes stuff. And he was talking about the fact that Kamala Harris used to be ranked the most far left, not using the word liberal and conservative. She was the most far left member of the Senate the whole time that she was serving. And now when you go, John Stossel, that's who it was. And when Stossel, when he was doing research for this video that he's putting together, he went to that website, and she doesn't even show up in there anymore. And so he asked them about it, and they asked them why, and they said, well, we just didn't think that one or two votes as a senator really provided a complete picture of the kind of person he is. So they took it out. So it's the exact same thing in both parties. And that gets back to my contention all along that, I mean, there's no difference between the parties. You know, it's like there's an old Native American proverb that the left wing and the right wing still belong to the same bird. I mean, you know, it's just, and that's what we're dealing with there in this. That's why Trump has that kind of power over the Republicans. That's why Biden ended up having that kind of power over the Democrats. And actually, I don't think it's Biden. I think it's Obama. I think Obama's kind of the puppet master behind everything that's going on in the Democrat Party right now. But still, though, that's the thing. So it's very frustrating and very sad. But we're not going to change. See, that gets back to what we said earlier. We're not going to change that by voting a certain way in November, because all those powers are still going to be there. We've got to start rebuilding the system at the local level.
Yeah, and that's also, again, as much as I admire Ron Paul, and I prefer Ron over Rand, but people like snippets, and people like to hear taglines like audit the Fed, abolish the Fed. And as Seth pointed out and I point out is that, you're not going to do anything because Congress will still have that authority under the 16th article. You're not, even people don't like to understand that, either I started really understanding when I was starting reading Supreme Court rulings, and with my second book, under the 17th Amendment, if people will read the fine print of that 17th Amendment, it says that the legislature of any state may empower the governor, the chief executive, to appoint. If you understand the verbiage, the verb may empower, yet they also may not empower. So you can really make a legal remedy saying the state legislature can appoint, as it was, when the framers visioned it, back to the state legislature. So, that's also, also the point that I'm also trying to make is that, you're right. The people has lost the conscience. People have lost the moral compass. And again, with this GOP convention, when I saw the Teamsters president speak, I worked for an anti-union organization. And, when I saw that, and I'm a big fan of Robert Taft and Fred Hartley, two great conservative constitutional American legislators, they'd probably be saying, what the hell? We fought to preserve workers' freedom, and now we see a Teamsters president. You might as well just dig up Jimmy Hoffa and do a shrine for him. So and yet to the Trump mentality, and even the Democrats, well, Democrats have always been pro-union, but to the Trump or Republican, they think it's okay. They think they justify those type of means, and it's very sad to see that. But people need to wake up and realize, and again, read the fine print in some articles and try to see if you can make something out of it. But also just wake up, because you're right, as you said, we have no more moral compass or conscience anymore. We just go with what the big celebrity style candidate says it's normal to do.
Well, and all these things we're talking about confirm something that Thomas Jefferson once said. After the republic was formed, he said that we produced a near perfect republic, but will the people keep it, or will they, in the enjoyment of plenty, having all this abundance, lose the memory of what freedom really is? Mm-hmm. And then he says this is the quote: "Material abundance without character is the path of destruction." And that's where all this, that's just one more reason why all this government spending is a bad deal. I can't tell you how many of my Christian friends, I'll just put, I can't tell you how many of them have told me that, well, you can't deny that things were better under the Trump administration. The economy was stronger. We were growing, blah, blah, blah. Prices were low. Gas prices were low, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, and I wrote an article about it at the time. And it's almost like the church that's described in the book of Revelation. It's like, they said, hey, we don't need God. We've got everything we need. We're rich. We're abundant and stuff like that. And all along, they didn't realize that they were poor and miserable and destined for destruction. And that's exactly what Thomas Jefferson said. Material abundance without character is the path of destruction. Mm-hmm. And so we, now, the only way to get that, I don't want to get off into a religious tangent, but the only way we're really going to see that, of course, is America needs a spiritual revival. I mean, we've got the founding fathers. It's always been argued about, whether they were deists or, that they were kind of agnostic and that, they didn't really found the country as a Christian organization. But that's not true. The country was founded on Christian principles. And it was Benjamin Franklin who said, it'd be foolish of us to think that the God who gave us life, gave us liberty, that we could just go ahead now and forget him and forget that he was the provider of these things. And that kind of goes back to why we're having this constitutional crisis, because constitutional crisis is one of the side effects of a moral crisis. And the moral crisis is because we have this spiritual crisis. And so it all just kind of, it builds on top of, you can't pick one thing and say, if I fix that, then we'll get back on track, because that ain't going to happen. The one thing that would fix it would be some sort of a new spiritual awakening. It's interesting, that your book is about that certain period of history in America, because that was also the time of one of the great awakenings in America. And it was a spiritual awakening that kind of got everything back on track, even after those amendments to the Constitution.
Interesting. No, you're right. As far as a spiritual awakening, I mean, I know the framers were religious men, but I don't think they were religious that they wanted government involved in religion. And, I've always read the First Amendment as being I know it was James Madison who wrote the First Amendment, and that's because the Commonwealth of Virginia at the time had the Church of England recognized religion for the Commonwealth, and I believe Madison was either Presbyterian or Episcopalian. I'm not sure which one, but I have an issue where when you're taking the oath of the office, that you swear an oath to a Bible or a Quran or a Torah or whatever. I think it should be on the Constitution itself. I don't think that's why I never really understood taking an oath with a Bible or a Quran or Torah. Like you've had many members of Congress from Minnesota take it on the Quran. And I think it should be on the Constitution, because the First Amendment is quite explicitly that Congress shall make no law with establishment of religion. And, it's no doubt in my mind that the framers were Christian men and Christian women, but I don't believe that they wanted government to be beholden to religion. Like you see in Argentina, that in Argentina you have to be a member of the Catholic Church to be president. I mean, I would like to see a Jewish person be president here, or I don't know, maybe a Muslim. If he's a good Muslim American, I don't mind seeing that. But I just want, what I seek is somebody to really read the Constitution and really understand the principles of America by the founders. Now, I was kind of understand the Articles of Confederation, and then when they made that convention change to the Constitution of 1787, the verbiage of the Constitution of 1787 changed, but I think the principles remained the same, that the powers of enforcement belong to the states with limited powers to the federal government. And yet somehow Daniel Webster and, other members of that, James Mason of Virginia, kind of changed that. And it's very sad that today we are seeing that. We're seeing that type of, just drastic change, really a continuation of that power for the government. So I do hope that one day we just return to the days of, respecting the sovereignty of the individual and the state and limited powers of the federal government. I know it won't be in my lifetime. I don't think we'll ever see it, but I'll keep on preaching that until people listen to me. I may sound like a broken record, but itchy and scratching is very irritating and nice to hear.
Yeah, I hear you. I would say back to what you were saying. I'm not pushing for any. As one of the movements that are now becoming very disturbing to me is Christian nationalism. I'm not into. I don't want a theocracy or anything like that. What I mean, though, when I say that it gets back to our moral compass, and one of the reasons, for example, that people swear on the Bible was because it used to be believed that that meant that you were promising God, and that used to be important, that you were promising God that you would keep your word. But Patrick Henry one time said, because on this subject, the whole thing about, like you even just mentioned, the whole thing about a sanctioned church and all that kind of stuff, it was an issue even at the founding of our country. But Patrick Henry said it cannot be emphasized too strongly or too often that this great nation was founded not by religionists, but by Christians, not on religions, but on the gospel of Jesus Christ. And for this very reason, people of other faiths have been afforded asylum, prosperity, and freedom of worship here. So see, there's the key. It's like, if we could get back to the basics, then we wouldn't have an issue with Muslims or anything like that. In fact, because we're a Christian nation, Muslims would be free to come to America and know that they'd be protected, and they would have a freedom to worship and all that kind of stuff. And we would be honoring the First Amendment of the Constitution. But so just kind of when we were talking, that quote, I was looking it up here on my computer while we were talking, and I said I just wanted to get it correct. But I'm not advocating for a church. I don't want a church in the United States. That would be unconstitutional. But again, the verbiage is what's key. Congress shall make no law establishing a church. That's it. Congress shall make no law. So our legislature, the House of Representatives and the Senate, with the signature of the president, cannot make a law, and that's something that they're talking about trying to do in the Trump administration. Passing laws where you'd have to be a Christian in order to serve, and that's unconstitutional. I'm a Christian, but I wouldn't want to see that, not at all, not in any way, shape, or form. So, but it's Congress should make no law. So that's why, for example, prayer in school is okay if the local. This goes back to the acting locally portion of what we were talking about. It should be okay if your local school wants to have prayer in school. That should be okay because that's not Congress establishing a law. We have an issue going on right now in a little town nearby where I live. There's an open auditorium that a small town used to make available to a church to hold services on Sunday. It's right on the lake. You got the Rocky Mountains in the background. It's just gorgeous. I live in Colorado, by the way.
Oh, nice.
And so this hotshot attorney just all of a sudden said, you know what, we've got a separation of church and state issue here. And it's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. Congress shall make no law. If Congress wanted to pass a law and demanded that the town hold church services there, that would be unconstitutional. But it's not unconstitutional if the local community, the local town council, the mayor, the citizens of the town, if they're all saying it's cool, we like that, we like the church holding their services there on Sundays. And it's like, then there's no conflict there. Just because the land is owned by the town, that's not an unconstitutional issue. So that's kind of where we got to, got to get back to our moorings on that particular issue. But hopefully I clarified myself here. I wasn't trying to say that we need, when I say revival, I'm talking about we need men's hearts to be changed. They need to stop thinking. There's a chapter in my book where I talk about how our country's become narcissistic and self-interested, and thinking only of itself, and thinking, hey, we're a great nation. We're the greatest nation that ever existed. So we can do whatever we want to do. Now, see, a spiritual revival is needed for that, man, because we're not. Man is not perfect. The founders said that too. They talk about how since we're not angels, we need governments to help keep men under control. So that's the kind of thing we're talking about there. So there's no conflict between the Constitution and a call for revival, and a little bit more influence on the Christian faith with our political leaders. I wouldn't want one to run for office though and say, "Yeah, I'm going to establish the Church of Jesus Christ. I'm going to present a bill." Well, see, that wouldn't work. That would be unconstitutional. That would not fly. So, did I make myself clear there?
Oh no! I mean, I know that you from your book and your stance. I think you respect the Constitution, and now that you respect other religions. I think I understand, and I think I would be in agreement with local communities. Now, I just have one more question, then I'll turn it over to Seth. What do you feel about what happened in Louisiana? That in every school, the legislature said that you must have 10 Commandments. What do you think about that?
Well. On a strictly 10th Amendment basis, I don't have a problem with it. This again gets back to acting locally. Mm-hmm. If you have the state legislature saying the state legislature, which was elected by the people of that state, and if the people of that state elected these people and that was something that they decided that they wanted to do. They're not pushing a specific religion. It's a document. In fact, the Ten Commandments is used by the Christian faith and the Jewish faith both. So they're not pushing us. They're not pushing a state church. They're not saying you have to worship God in a certain way or anything like that. They're just saying, you know what? We want the Ten Commandments posted. And if they have a problem with that, by the way, in Washington. How can they justify the fact that Moses is holding the Ten Commandments over the entrance to the Supreme Court building? I mean, there wasn't a problem at one time with religion and government. They were able to coexist because government didn't try to tell religion what to do, and religion didn't try to tell the government what to do. Where we're having a problem is when they're both trying to do that. That's kind of a tricky issue, and I kind of think that's a little bit of a squirrel moment, to be honest. I mean, it's kind of a distraction from the real thing that's going on, and that is the fact that they want to try to establish in some way some kind of moral basis in the public schools. Because I think it could be argued that public schools are unconstitutional, but I would go there absolutely. So, but anyway, I don't have a big problem with it as long as you're not saying, hey, when you come in the school building, you have to bow 3 times before this plaque of the Ten Commandments and swear an oath to it. That would be wrong. But if they just want to have it in the buildings where and kids will be able to see it and read it, maybe ask questions about it, I don't have a problem with that any more than I'd have a problem with them having a poster of the Constitution of the United States of America on the wall for them to.
Yeah, no,
go ahead. No, that I just to say they could pass a law saying that too.
No, you're right. I don't see an issue with that. The issue that I have with is that, you mentioned the 10th Amendment, but yet again, sadly, because of the 17th, and you have Louisiana's congressional delegation coming in with special funding for that type of thing, and then you lose that sovereignty. So if Louisiana wants to do it with their own funds, no problem there, and if it's not going to infringe on anybody's religious rights, religious freedom, no problem there. But I kind of see Louisiana's John Kennedy's and forgot the other senator from Louisiana coming in and giving funding to the state of Louisiana, federal funding, and that's really where I bring up the issue of dependency, where it's people keep saying blue states supply money to red states. Not really. It's red states also supply money to blue states, and it's a mutual aid society that they've become to become dependent. So that's my only concern of that, is that whenever a state has this type of issues, there's always a little funding of federal funds into it, where I really have an issue on it, because then Louisiana has become more dependent than when Southern delegates in 1850 passed the Fugitive Slave Law, and they really became dependent off that. So that's my only concern. But I really understand your point, and thank you very much for expressing your views on that. I really appreciate it.
Sure, no problem.
Yeah, and then I'll just say that this is a good example of an issue of where we've kind of lost our principles. To me, I'm pretty libertarian on the issue of education, and that I want to see the end of government and schooling. I want to see it all done. I had prayer in my classroom too, because I went to a private Christian school. So, that this is the problem is, we've become so dependent, and schooling is a good example of where parents, even after seeing all the crap that's being shoved on kids in these schools, the parents keep putting them back in the hands of government to raise their kids. And it's, I want to see an end to that. But, that's, really, whether we're talking about education, we're talking about COVID, we're talking about post 9/11, we've lost our principles all around, and that's what we need to get back to. And I think your book does a good job of illuminating that, and hopefully people buy it and support it.
I hope so too.
Yeah, no. Feel free to if you want to. I really enjoyed this conversation, David, and I've looked into your group, and I kind of agree with most of what you said, even on religious liberty. I do agree with that. So we've really enjoyed you, and we would love to have you back. You have any other special where people can find your book and other books that you've written to our followers and listeners?
Sure. Well, first of all, I wish there were other books. This is my first.
So, okay.
This is going to be the first of many, though.
Okay.
My wife is in the publishing business, and she says the first thing you're supposed to do after you've published a book is start writing your next one. So I am getting some ideas together on another book, and but for people interested in the new axis of evil, they can go. There's a website for it, and that's all it is. It's thenewaxisofevil.com. If you go to thenewaxisofevil.com, you can order it there. It's $14.95 in paper book. It's $9.90 paperback. $9.95 if you want an ebook version or a Kindle, I should say, Kindle version. And you can buy it from your preferred source. It's Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's other sources there on the website that you can buy it. So you can get it there. And I would also like to invite people to become followers of the Strident Conservative. And again, that website address is StridentConservative.com. I write 2 or 3 articles a week on these things and these types of things. My article tomorrow, by the way, is a rebroadcast of an article written by Mike Whitehead.
John White.
John, I don't know why I wanted to say Mike. John Whitehead, he gave me permission to repost an article that he did that kind of goes with one of the chapters in my book, and that's the political matrix presenting an illusion of liberty in America. And I have a chapter in my book called about the Washington matrix, and so that's kind of there was some simpatico ideas there, and actually I kind of worked off and on with them while I was working on the book. They provided some information for it. And so anyhow, that's tomorrow's article, but people can, I also am featured, I also have a 2-minute daily radio broadcast that I do that's usually kind of connected to the articles I've written, but it's about this stuff that's going on in America today. It's all from a Christian, constitutional, conservative point of view, with some libertarian leanings in there too, probably, I would think. And so and you can see, the reason I mention that is that even if you're not heard locally at your local radio station, you can get copies of the podcast on my website. There's a podcast page, and I kind of rotate about the most recent 90 episodes. It's only 2 minutes long, so it's about 2 or 3 months worth of content's always being rotated through the podcast page. So you can do that too. And, just want to invite people to follow. But more than that, I guess it's like, whether you read the book or not, and again, I hope they do, I hope you'll get involved. I mean, it's like liberty is too precious a commodity to just roll over and let the other side take it. We just can't do that. And, when you think of what the founding fathers gave up, most of them died. Some of them were arrested in the Revolutionary War and were assassinated or killed. And they gave it all, and that's why they said at the end of the document, we pledge our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor, and that's what we need in America again. We need people willing to give their life, their wealth, and their honor to try to protect liberty while we still have a shot at it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. That's good that it's your first book, and I wish you well. I'm gonna go to Amazon and get it because it sounds like a good read. I'm also on my third and fourth book, mostly again on my state sovereign doctrine. My third book is going to be on elections. I hope I can get it out there before this 2024 election or just after it. I want to bring people to the ideas of the framers and the framers. We haven't seen the framers any heirs to the framers that really stuck to the principles, and that's basically all my concepts. That I think it's based on state sovereignty and not on autonomy of the central government. So. But kind of like aligned with your book, so that's good. So, like I said, David, it was a very pleasure having you on, and hope you can come on. And I'll follow. I'm going to reach out again. We're going to reach out and to stay in contact because this has been a very interesting discussion.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate you saying that, and it's been a pleasure being with you guys. I look forward to joining you again if you decide you'd like to have me on.
Sure, absolutely. So, with that said, you want to add anything, or you're good?
Yeah, just reiterate what Federico said. Thanks for joining us. And, the ideas are what matter. Yeah. And we need to start discussing them again instead of the clown show.
And let me say one last thing real quick. I know Absolutely. We're out of time, but you mentioned the election. And ironically, about 3/4 of this book is information that would be very pertinent before the election, because a lot of the examples I provide about the war on liberty are coming from people who are in the game right now. Donald Trump, Joe Biden, now de facto Joe Biden through Kamala Harris, but the Republicans and Democrats, both major players. A lot of these guys who are out there right now trying to influence the outcome in November are in this book as examples of being guilty of being involved in the war on liberty. So that'd be one more reason maybe your readers or your listeners might want to pick it up.
Oh, beautiful! No, absolutely, yeah. That's sounds like a riveting read. The New Axis, and even when I read the subtitle, goes, it's both. It's a criticism on both sides. And Seth and I, and what you've been saying, we're on the same page. That both sides, this lesser of two evils. It's really just people say, well, if you vote for Trump, it's the lesser of two evils, or if you vote for Kamala, it makes no sense. They're both evil, plain and simple. They both want, a bigger control of our lives, and people need to wake up on that. So, I'm gonna really be interested in. I'm gonna probably do it tonight or in a few days to get your book because it's quite interesting.
Sounds great. Appreciate that very much.
Sure. Well, David, it's been a pleasure. We'll discuss, see if you want to come on, and have yourself a great night and a great week ahead.
You do the same, Prince. Thank you.
All right. Have a great weekend.
Good night.
Bye-bye.